everyone, welcome back. You can see I have my makeup artist and friend, Nikki LaRose with me.
Hi.
Today we've got another makeup mistakes, and the topic is a really good one.
A really good one. It's eyebrows.
Eyebrows.
Ooh.
All the mistakes that we see people making with their eyebrows. All right, so before we even get into the makeup mistakes, I've started to see, now that we're doing more of these types of videos, people saying like, well, there are no rules when it comes to makeup, or like that's because, you think so, but not necessarily. And I think what's really important to point out is makeup is very personal, and we definitely agree with that. Everyone has their own makeup technique and what they like, their personal preference. So,
absolutely.
So that's something to keep in mind when you're listening to our tips. All right, so first off, I feel like some of the brow mistakes stem from people not really understanding how their brows should look. Like even just not people that don't even bother to do their brows.
Yeah.
They sometimes are just unaware, I guess. Like we only know what we know.
Yeah.
Right?
I think mistake number one would just be not even doing anything to your brows. Right. And I grew up making that mistake. All my teenage years. I didn't do anything to them.
I did a little too much.
Oh,
I was the opposite.
Yeah, you were the opposite. So I just didn't do anything to them. And I think that's like a huge mistake. Your brows, they're so important. They really frame your face. So when you leave them alone and you don't groom them or you don't define them, you're really missing out on having a structured, more like put together look. I think the main reason why you would want to take the time to do your brows is to frame your face, like I mentioned earlier, to really frame your eyes and bring out your eyes, but you don't want to go overboard to the point where it's taking over your face.
Right, where it's the focal point.
Right. When you enter a room, the first thing you see is someone's eyebrows. You don't want that.
Right.
But then you also don't want to have where you walk into a room and people are wondering, where are your eyebrows? So it's kind of like finding that happy medium, right?
Right,
I think brows should always have something, personally. Yeah. I mean, unless you're like just completely blessed with the most ultimately perfect brows, we could all use just a little something. Yeah. So whether it's like clear brow gel, a little bit of powder, even like a pomade, just something, right?
Just something to make them look nice and neat.
Yes.
Okay, so then mistake number two, what would you say?
I'd say trying to make them identical and not remembering that they're sisters, not twins. I feel like we've talked about this so many times.
This is like life, right? Like my eye shape is different on both eyes. Like
same.
It's very hard to be a perfectly symmetrical person.
And if you are,
God bless you.
Hats off. Yeah, I'm so happy for you. But I think stressing too much about making sure they're, identical down to like every last hair. Life is too short for that. Give yourself some like forgiveness. Yep. And if they're not identical, it's not a big deal.
And in some ways, when you try to make them too perfectly matched, then you kind of go the other route to actually what I would say is mistake number three. Yes. And you make them too dark. I'd say that's mistake number three.
That's absolutely something that I see happen all the time. I mean, I've done it too.
I do it all the time.
We're all guilty of it, Listen,
too heavy-handed, using the wrong shade that's too dark, all of it.
I have good brow days and then I have really bad brow days.
Same.
And so you really never know what you're gonna get when you wake up. Like, I'm having a good brow day today, thank God. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
Right.
It's kind of like black wing eyeliner, right? Or like a liquid liner.
Yes.
When you're trying to get each side totally perfect, but then you end up getting this side bigger, so then you have to make that side bigger. It's the same thing with your brows when you're filling them in, especially like if you're using a pencil or something that's a little more like aggressive.
Yep.
It's really easy to overdo it when you're trying to make them perfectly match up. A good tip that I highly recommend anyone do when they're filling in their eyebrows is not to look super close into a mirror. So like, let's say you're filling in your eyebrows, right? And you have like a small little compact and you're holding that compact and you're like really close because you want to get in there and you want to see, right? And you want to get those little hair strokes, but you lose so much perspective if you're that close to a mirror.
Because you're not like looking at your full face.
So a good rule of thumb is when you're doing your brows, make sure you take time to take a step back, just like with anything with makeup, eyeshadow, foundation, contour, all of it. Take a step back, that way you can really evaluate the whole face and see where you need more versus when you're this close up, you really lose perspective because it just gets a little blurry.
So I think that leads to another mistake though, and that is using the wrong shade.
Yes,
right?
That's a big one.
That sometimes leads to your brows being a little bit too
much.
Yeah, intense.
Yeah, like when I mentioned earlier, like when you enter a room and the first thing you see is your brows.
That used to be me.
That happens.
It still is me sometimes. I cannot.
We all have our days, like I said, like no one's perfect. I have good brow days, I have really bad brow days. But when you're choosing a brow color, you definitely don't want to go too dark. So for us, like brunettes, for example, you would think that like, oh, we're gonna go for the darkest brown.
Right,
I'm gonna go for a black.
Right, like I have almost black hair. It's like dark brown. You think that's what you do.
Right, so it's actually the opposite. And so I think that's actually tricky when people are searching for brow products and they're trying to figure out what their color is going to be. They think, oh, I'm just going to match my hair. Unless you're blonde, then you would go darker. Like I love like a bleach blonde with some dark taupe brows. Stunning.
But still, taupe is very specific.
It is very specific, yes.
Yeah.
But with brunettes, you actually want to go about a shade to 2 shades lighter because it softens up the rest of our appearance because we already have dark hair. So if you throw really dark brows, the combination is just a little too much.
Yeah.
And it's personal too. Like some people love really dark brows and black hair. I don't, but
I mean, it's just a very intense look.
it's a very intense look. So if you don't want to have super intense brows to go with your, more intense dark hair, definitely go for a shade that's at least 1 shade lighter.
So if you are somebody who is brunette, like dark brunette, like me and you, what would you say?
I would say at least a shade to a shade and a half to 2 shades lighter.
Okay.
But play with it. Like makeup is personal and it's a lot of preference as well, but try to keep that rule of thumb when you're picking your brow color.
Okay, and then how about if you're blonde? What do you go with?
1 to 2 shades darker.
Okay.
Yes.
But
so it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, okay, because you're making them stand out.
Yes.
How about a redhead? What does because I see there are like these like auburn shades out there on the market, but do redheads actually use red eyebrow?
Some do, and I think they have a lot more wiggle room. They have a lot more like room to kind of bend the rules, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of redheads that have really, really dark, like brunette brows. And then I see ones that have like light, more taupey brows. And then I see ones that look amazing with a true auburn color brow. It's still very like subjective,
Right. Like these are like
really
these are like very, very general rules.
Yes, exactly. They're guidelines and they're general rules just to help you out. But ultimately,
Yeah.
preference is going to be key.
All right, so what would you say is another mistake you see people make with their brows?
I would say using the wrong product for their brows.
Like pencil versus
powder versus a lot of people use like the pomade
or like a gel.
or a gel, right? And so it's really just about like taking into consideration what is your brow hair like? Is it more fine? Is it more coarse? Is it really thick?
Is it curly?
Is it curly? I mean, does it grow,
I think that's a
does it grow up? Does it grow down?
I have some hairs that are like, they want, like if my brows were to grow longer, they would absolutely be curly hairs.
I know exactly which side you're talking about too. I feel like this side wants to do it, yes.
Let's make it really easy, like a really easy guideline for these types of products. So pencils, who are they best for?
People that need a lot of help with their brows. It's going to be super beneficial to grab a pencil, and if you really are trying to like create an entire brow, if you don't have
build a
much,
brow, right?
Build a brow, exactly, yeah. And also if we're someone that needs it to last a long time,
Like if they have oily skin.
Yep, pencils have great staying power, so that too would typically benefit the most from pencils.
Okay, powders.
Powders are best if you're new to filling in your brows and you're not as skilled. They're a lot more forgiving and they're a lot more easier to handle too because they're a powder, right? So they're not as harsh, they're not as tough as like a pencil would be. And if you make a mistake with a powder, it's so much easier to fix that versus a pencil.
Right.
And also just if you want a more natural look, powders are just softer.
Soft. Yeah.
They're a softer appearance by nature.
Soft is like the perfect word to describe it.
Yep.
But you're definitely not going to get like a defined brow hair look, right? With the powder.
Not necessarily.
All right, so then how about those like pomade type of products? The ones that are like, they almost look like they're like a gel, I guess, to me, or like a wax almost.
Yeah. They look like a gel liner.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so they do exactly like the dipping gel liners, yeah.
Those are great for people that have more sparse brows. So same kind of thing, like, if you're filling your brows with a pencil because you need to like kind of create a brow, they're great for that. They also tend to be the longest wearing, like most formulas I would say are either water resistant or sweat resistant. And so they definitely stay on a lot longer, especially if you're using it on more bare skin, which people that have sparse brows, they're pretty much drawing on a brow onto bare skin.
Right, but then it can look a little bit harsh, right?
But it can look a little harsh if you're not careful and you're not like, really skilled with the blending techniques, right?
Yeah.
So if you're wanting more of a natural brow, I wouldn't suggest a pomade. But if you want that bold brow and it's your look, go for it.
So we're talking about like the Anastasia dip brow.
Yes, the dip brow, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like that really became popular with the classic Instagram brow.
Oh, that's how it was created.
Yeah, like it's that like super defined, like you can see like the rectangle in the front.
Yes,
like
yes.
Like the very, it's like very clearly defined, right?
Yes, that's when it had its time, was with the Instagram kind of trendy brow, right?
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Not like the fluffy soft brows anymore, that are in right now.
But listen though, there's definitely ways to make that pomade look feathered
Okay.
You know, it just takes a lot more skill.
Right.
And patience.
Right.
So I wouldn't suggest it if you're not going for more of a bold look.
Okay. How about like the clear or tinted gels? That I personally tend to use them more so to like hold my brows in place. They tend to have like a spoolie, like they come in a little tube, you know, with a spoolie on them. What about those?
Most of the ones that are tinted have some sort of fiber to them. So when you're applying them in your brows, it's actually kind of like a 2-in-1. So they'll tint your brows really naturally, but they'll also attach little fibers to make your brows look thicker. I would suggest a product like that for people that have almost brows like mine. My brow hair is really light. I have to dye my brows. I think it's just from like all my skincare, they just tend to lighten up for whatever reason. So when I use a tinted brow gel, it really helps like fake it for me. So it tints my brow hair, but it also adds a thickness and like a natural fluffy look to them that I love. But so I wouldn't recommend something like that for someone who has a thick, full brow naturally, because it could be just too much.
Right, because then it's just gonna make them look like they have caterpillar brows.
It'll make them look blocky when you don't want them to look blocky, and just too much color, in my opinion, for someone who has really thick brows naturally. For someone who's blessed with thick brows, you would want to do more of a clear brow gel, and then maybe like something like a little brow pen, just to draw a couple little hairs where you need them, and then call it a day.
Right. Right, that makes sense. So the clear is mostly for the people that are just like trying to hold brows in place because they've got so much brow.
That are blessed with brows. I mean, just get a good, nice, strong hold and brush them up, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, the next mistake I see, not creating an angle, like an arch.
Yes.
Right? Like I was talking about this. I used to have this very specific like rounded look to my brows. And when I look back, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I look like I'm surprised or something.
Yeah.
Or like really happy or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just some kind of like, it gives this like interesting look to your face. And also makes your face just look round in general, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas like creating a defined arch and sticking with that look has been life-changing for me.
Yeah.
So actually walk me through like the general guidelines of the shape of your brow. Like where should your brows start? Where should the arch be? And then where should it end?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a general rule of thumb. You can look it up online. It's all over the place. It's been around forever. It's a guideline, you know, use
Always
it.
a guideline. Everything's
Always
a guideline.
Yeah, use it. Don't go crazy. Just use it loosely, but it does help. So let's talk about where your brow should start, right? So if you hold this up to the very side of your nose and you go straight up, this is a general guide to where you want your brows to start on the inner part. Not too far in, that will close up your eye shape. Not too far out, that will look just misshapen. It won't be as flattering. And then
it makes your face look wider, I feel like, if you start too far out.
Absolutely. And then for the arch, if you take this, now online you'll see it's gonna say like, if you hold it to the very tip of your nose and you angle it, that's one way to find it. But I think the easiest way to find where your arch should be is just taking this and then lining it up to the very end of your lash line and then going straight up. That is, to me, I think that's the best way to decide where your arch should be. So for Susan, this is about where Susan's arch should be. Right here. And so that's a general guide, right? And so it's not gonna be cookie cutter for everyone. For me, I like to bend the rules just a little bit sometimes, depending on like the client that I'm working with. Sometimes it looks even more flattering if you just take that arch out just a little bit further than you're supposed to.
Right.
I think it's a really beautiful, flattering way to wear your arch.
Like almost like enhance your eyes.
Yeah,
and make them look more
it
open.
almost pulls them out a little bit more. Rather than going like straight up with your arch, which could give you like that permanent surprise look.
Right.
I think it's a little more
completely round them out. Almost.
Yeah, I think it's a little more like relaxed and almost more like sultry to have your arch start just a little bit further out.
Okay, that's good to know. And then where should they end?
And then for the end, if you take the tip of your nose, take your brush again, and you angle it right there. That would be a general guideline to where you want to end your tail.
Got it. Okay. Almost like where you would almost go with like your eyeliner.
Yep.
Right? Like they're almost like coming to a point.
Exactly. Yep. Another mistake I see all the time, and I think it's something that people just don't think about doing, is not setting their brows. So you know you set the rest of your face, right?
Yeah, we set our concealer, we set our foundation.
Right, because you want the ideas, you want it to last all day.
Yep.
If you don't set your brows, think about all the oil that we have just in general, and then when you're doing like your skincare and your moisturizer and then your liquid foundation and then you do your brows, but you don't set that area, your brows just aren't going to stay in place as long as you would want them to. And so I think a great tip is don't skip setting your brows.
So like
especially if you have, and it doesn't take a lot.
Like translucent powder.
take the smallest amount of translucent powder. You only need a tiny bit.
Yeah.
And so I'll run just a little bit of translucent powder in your brows. I do it in my brows. I have to do it in my brows. Otherwise, they will be so shiny throughout the day.
Wait, okay, so I'm making this mistake. I don't use any translucent powder. So I always thought that like doing, like filling in the color and then setting them with like my clear gel, for instance,
right,
was me setting my brows. But that's not what you're saying.
No, different.
Take us through this.
Okay, so it's a different kind of setting,
Okay.
right? So that's one way to set your brows, and that's something that I would never skip. Love a clear brow gel just to set them into place, but that's talking about the hair.
The hair.
That
okay.
sets the hair. I'm talking about setting whatever color you're going to use or whatever product you're going to use to fill in your brows.
You're talking about skin, which actually I can't believe I didn't think about.
I'm talking about setting the skin of your brows.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So whether you fill in your brows with a powder, a pomade even, or a pencil, for me especially a pencil, set your pencil with a little bit of translucent powder. It's a game changer. It's also great too if you're in a high humidity place. It's a great idea to set your brows. I mean, that's when it's really going to come into play. Or even just in the summer, like when you're out and it's hot and you're sweating.
Yeah.
You don't want your brows to be super shiny.
It never, I know.
It looks really fake, actually.
I'm telling you, it never even occurred to me, but it makes so much sense to me. And that goes to show also, like, if you are somebody that has more sparse hairs and you're building your brows, you absolutely have to set them.
Yeah, because you want your brow to last. You don't want to lose your brow throughout the day. I mean, that's mortifying.
It's like that emoji, the like...
Yeah. Oh, I know. Your head's just like...
The head explosion.
But watch,
emoji.
You'll see more people do it now that I brought it up.
Yeah.
Yes. But so that, anyway, that's a great tip. I highly recommend that if you're someone who struggles and has very sparse brows and has to really build a brow or fill them in, or if you have really oily skin, just take a fluffy eyeshadow brush, dust a little bit on. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Just take a little bit and that's all you need and it will make a huge difference.
Cool. Dang, I learned something new today too.
Good.
Okay, final mistake. What do you think that is when it comes to brows?
I see a lot of people making the mistake of not grooming their brows before they go in to fill them in. So, meaning like taking, either a disposable mascara wand or a spoolie. These are great to have on hand, and just brushing through your brows and brushing them up and just grooming them. Just generally grooming them.
Like getting them into place first.
Yeah.
And seeing what you're working with.
Yeah, and sometimes, we tend to have dry skin sometimes in our brows, or just, you want to brush through them every once in a while. Don't ignore them.
Our brows do definitely. The skin, especially under our brows.
Yes, it could be neglected.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, because for a long while there, I was like, not, for instance, like using my exfoliating toner on my brows. Like I would just completely skip that area.
I still skip it.
It's like you almost can't help it because there's hair there. So you're like, it just like doesn't occur to you to like, because it's not like we're doing that in our hair. So it just doesn't occur to you sometimes that you've got like skin under your brows.
And it needs to be taken care of. And just like brushing your hair on your head, that helps to break down dirt and oil, and it helps to like, just get the blood flowing. Same thing with your brows, right? So you want to make sure you brush them. Take the time, don't neglect them. Another good tip too, if you're wondering like, where do I start with filling in my brows? Like, I don't really know how to like navigate that. Yeah. We've talked about this before. If you brush your hair down all the way,
and you're gonna say that,
it's gonna look really funny, but if you brush them all the way down, it's much easier to see where your gaps are. And so before you brush them back up, that's when you'd want to take like your brow pencil or your brow powder and then fill in those gaps that are very visible, and then you brush your brow hair back up.
And then you see whatever else is left.
Yeah, so if you're struggling with that at home, try that technique. It makes it so much easier to navigate your brows.
So before we end this video, just a really quick tutorial or like walk us through the steps of just filling in your brows if you're a novice, like you're brand new to this. What would you do?
So where to start, I think, would be grooming them. So taking that spoolie, like I mentioned, brushing them up, brushing them down. Actually, brush them down first, see where you need to fill them in. Then brush them up, make sure they're nice and in place. And then taking a pencil or a brow powder, depending on like what you need for your brows, filling them in. And then if you're more on the oily side, or if you need your brows to really last all day, or if you're in a high humidity area, or if it's super hot, or if you're working out, any of those things. Take just a tiny bit of loose setting powder, like I mentioned.
With like a fluffy brush.
The fluffy brush, just a nice clean eyeshadow brush, just dust a little bit on. Then you would go in with either your tinted brow gel, depending on if you want like more of a thickened look. Like I said, they typically have a fiber in them, so they make your brow hairs look thicker. Or if you don't need that, and then you just need to go straight for a clear brow gel, do the clear brow gel, and then you're good to go.
Great. Well, these were such great tips. I mean, I feel like I even learned something here
Nice.
because I still struggle with my brows. I feel like brows are one of the hardest
They
to
are.
get down.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone eventually has a mistake with their brows.
Yeah, and like I said, they're so personal.
Yeah.
So it's really about figuring out what's going to work best for your brows and your brow needs, and then going from there.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree. If you guys have any other tips to add or if you have questions, Nikki is here on YouTube as well. So follow her on her YouTube channel, but definitely ask questions in the
Yeah.
comments below. You can find her on Instagram. She's at Makeup by Nikki LaRose.
That's me.
Yeah. I'm at Susan Yara. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.